Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining this H-1B CAP visa alternatives webinar. I think let's give a few more minutes for those who are still not joining yet, and then we'll get things started. Okay, why don't we go ahead and kick things off? So thank you for joining, everybody. We're excited to have this webinar with you on unlocking opportunities for the H-1B CAP visa alternatives, covering the U.S. with my partner, Sean Foster, a U.S. immigration attorney, and covering global options on my side. So with that, we'll get started talking a little bit about us as your host. I'll let Sean take it away.
Thank you, Michelle. Happy to be here. I'm Sean Foster. I'm the principal of Pampin & Foster in Woburn, Massachusetts, just north of Boston. I've been around for about 40 years. We specialize in employment-based immigration. We also do family-based work and NATS work as well. I'm in about my 20th year in the field, and Janet Forney, who also works with me, she's at about the 10-year mark. How about you, Michelle? Say a little bit about you and yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. So my name is Michelle LePage. I am the founder of Global Mobility Partners, or GMP. We provide global, outbound, or non-US immigration services for corporations and their employees. I've been doing this for just over 10 or I think maybe 11 years now, supporting companies with their global immigration needs.
So the reason we talk today is we have a problem in the U.S. with the H-1B CAP. It operates on a lottery-based system where once a year we essentially raffle them off. And the problem is that the supply is the same, 85,000. It's been that way for quite some time. This chart kind of shows the demand and how it's spiked. Just if you look at the last several years, fiscal year 2022, over 300,000, over 400,000 the following year, over 800,000 the year after that. So there's just many, many more than they have to go around. And it creates this problem that Michelle and I are happy to speak to today. What happens when you can't get your case selected? Well, really, counseling organizations and individuals, there's a couple different ways we have to look at it. One, do we want to be proactive, or do we just want to sort of try again next year? Most people have 3 years to work under optional practical training and a few years to try it. If we do want to get more proactive, we have to look at it in a twofold sense. Does it have to be in the United States? For some jobs, like in science, it does. Or this is where Michelle comes in. Can we look more broadly at other parts of the world and maybe look at a solution like that? If we go to the next slide, my role is basically to speak to what are your H-1B CAP alternatives in the United States? And there are a lot here in our toolkit. I could speak for about an hour on each. So for purposes of today, all I really want to do is just kind of scratch the surface and talk about them. I'd be happy to get into them in more detail separately. But the first bullet point talks about a concurrent H-1. This is a situation where you have two H-1Bs simultaneously. You can get one with a cap-exempt nonprofit to work, say, 5 or 8 hours a week teaching, mentoring students. Then any private employer can file their own petition to pick up the balance of time, the other 32 or 35 hours a person has available in a week. They're complicated. They're two petition solutions. You have to stay tied to the academic anchor. You can't just ditch them. People are definitely kind of burning the candle at both ends, but that's one option when we can't get an H-1. Next bullet point down, sometimes people go back to school, and you can get CPT, curricular practical training, to work right away and keep your job. You have to be in school 9 credit hours in a graduate program, 4 of which can be online. So the way programs like this can be structured, you can have intensive weekend hours in the classroom, and that can make it work, and people can work during the week. Next point down, maybe marriage opens a door. If it's a US citizen, that's the best way to apply for a green card. But if it's a foreign national, there may be a way to get what we call derivative-based work authorization, maybe as an H-4 or an L-2 or a J-2. You can also go straight to permanent residency and just do a green card. Again, the OPT runway can be 3 years. Perm's a slow creature and vehicle, but if you start it right away, maybe you can get a green card without even needing an H-1. We do have a case study from my practice in my office we'll talk about later on that can kind of show that to you. Certain nationalities can open some doors. We list those 5 here in the slide. It's not everybody. Talent visas, next to last bullet point in the slide. If you are extraordinary, we see this a lot in biotech, people that have published, won awards, have invented things. We could maybe get them an O1 or look at a self-petition green card option. Last thing, sometimes we could create like a new business for the person under what's called an E2, requires there to be a treaty between the US and the home country. Maybe there isn't one, but that's kind of what we take it through when we just can't get an H1. On the next slide, we do have some international options or international information that we share. I'm going to kick this to Michelle momentarily, but on our side, sometimes we like clients to know, especially if the job can be performed remotely, you don't need any type of US work visa if you're working for a US company internationally. And also, maybe we can leverage that on the flip side in a way that's beneficial. I have a lot of clients that will accept at least 1 year international assignments overseas. We can then bring them back under what's called an L1, or even better, we can do the best type of first preference EB1C green card case if they're in international management overseas. So, we can kind of use these opportunities to do good for people on the US side, but in the meanwhile, just to sort of keep their jobs because they can't get an H1, maybe the best option is to look internationally, and that's where Michelle comes in.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. So I think that's a really good point you just made about looking into if the individual who needs to go overseas is going to be actually, working in that country or remaining on a US job and just physically in another country. They obviously don't need a US visa for that if they're in a different country. And that kind of kicks me into my topic here of, first off, to start, if we're trying to look globally at the options available as the alternative to someone who was not selected in the cap lottery, then I would say your first line of defense would be to say, okay, where as a company do we have offices? Because that will be your kind of most obvious and easy path of least resistance. The reason for that is that as an employer, having an affiliate office in, let's say, Canada or Mexico or Ireland, that means that we can access intercompany transfer visa category, which is going to be quickest and easiest, generally speaking. And depending on if the applicant qualifies based on the actual criteria, which is usually pretty straightforward, and most people do if they've applied for an H-1B cap, we're looking at fairly smooth sailing to get them into another country. If you don't have affiliate offices abroad, then I think an important thing to think about is something that's often overlooked, which is the employer of record or EOR companies like Deal and many others out there who can employ your foreign national or you foreign nationals in another country where your employer just doesn't have an office, isn't able to employ and sponsor and pay you. This is like a co-employment arrangement where you are, you're contracted, you're paid, and you're potentially sponsored from an immigration process with the employer of record company, but then you are, assigned back to your employer full time to do your actual job for them. Can be a costly option, but it's worth exploring for those who really don't have any other option. And then on to the next slide here. I wanted to dive in a little bit to an example. Ireland is something that I have seen coming up a lot lately. It seems to be, for whatever reason, probably because their immigration system is so accessible, a popular option for those who need an alternative abroad. So I won't go into every detail here, but I just have the two boxes. I wanted to highlight one immigration category, the critical skills employment permit, which is generally used for long-term, local or permanent hires that are, brand new hires. You don't necessarily have to be intercompany transferred, like the box on the right here. Different criteria. The important point to think about if the U.S. is, the ultimate destination and plan for the foreign national is, can they return on the L1 in future? So right off the bat, you have to think the critical skills employment permit is eligible for return to the US because it requires that the individual be on local salary and contract in Ireland. On the flip side, the payroll and contract cannot be in Ireland. It must remain abroad somewhere like the US for the intercompany transfer permit. So I want to highlight this because it'd be a shame to say, oh, I can go to Ireland, eligible for the permit, sure, I'll return to the US in future, or maybe I won't, I don't know. But if if you're eligible for both of these categories, choose the one that's going to be advantageous for you for a future return to the US, if that's at all on the horizon. So next slide, just another example on Canada. Again, two immigration categories here, one in each box. Intercompany transfer permit, really common, one likely eligible for it if you already work for your company at least 12 months in the last 3 years, and you're in a specialized knowledge worker category or a managerial category. Also could look at the labor market impact assessment or LMIA category. Just, I think something to keep in mind here is this is a topic I see come up a lot. A lot of foreign nationals talk about how they want the LMIA category in Canada. It's the only one they're familiar with sometimes, and they think it's all they can qualify for. But an LMIA category is for those really who don't qualify for an LMIA exempt work permit, like the intercompany transfer or a myriad of other options that we can explore offline if you're interested. So almost like your last resort, if you will, because you should explore what other options are available to you. So I think that's good for Canada. If we can jump to the next slide, a couple of other topics I wanted to talk about that are really popular. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the digital nomad visas in some countries. This is a really popular topic right now and has been for some time, especially during the pandemic, when people were starting to kind of, work remotely and looking at working in other countries perhaps. And it's stayed like a pretty popular topic ever since. And a lot of countries already had a digital nomad visa. I believe we're well over 40 countries now that have one. And some new ones are joining the mix and, creating a visa category for digital nomad visas, which are, people that work remotely and aren't working, if you're in Spain physically, you're not working for a Spanish company. This would be the appropriate visa for you potentially. So, lots of options there we can explore offline. If you're an employer, you're getting a lot of questions about this. It's a good idea to set a global mobility policy up, which I highlight here in box 2, because, I see a lot of companies Foreign nationals are asking about it and they don't really have a policy. Do you support someone who wants a digital nomad visa or not? And if you do, what does support mean? Are you just saying, allowing them to get the visa and saying, okay, you can go work in X country, or are you paying for it? Are you helping with health insurance? Are you setting certain work hours, certain limitations on where in the globe they can go, perhaps based on their time zone and what expectations their manager has for their role? So important things to set in advance and setting a precedence, right? You as a company, are you allowing this for some but not all? What's kind of your approach there? So we're happy to help you with that if you would like. And then last point here, there will likely be tax implications to the employee. That's for a period of 6 months to a year or longer. Anyone generally is going to trigger tax implications in a country when they're physically in that country, even if they're not being paid or working for a company in said country. But a common question I see is the employers worried, are they going to be taxed? Are they going to be liable for something? Let's say you're a US company, your individual, your foreign national is in Ireland. Generally speaking, every country has different rules. But generally speaking, you as a US company, you're not being taxed by the Ireland government, right? So your employee might, and there might be some employment law matters that you want to look into. But strictly speaking, especially from an immigration perspective, you as a US company really don't have much, if anything, to do with that digital nomad visa and that person's physical presence in another country. So on to the next one here. Something else I want to talk about a little bit on the next slide is just creative solutions, for placing employees abroad. This is great for you as a company to think about when there's just not great options for your foreign national or for you foreign nationals, to think about, how you can help your employer, find solutions for you and not just place, the, job entirely on them. So I think about this is some ideas I would be in box one. Many countries are friendly, I would say, to extended stays for visitors. So I think it's something to think about as far as which countries these are. Where can you as a foreign national go, maybe just temporarily? Your scenario might be where you don't need to go somewhere for a year plus. Maybe you have applied for a perm, like Sean was mentioning, and you just have like a gap in employment authorization in the US and you just need to fill it, somewhere else for a short period of time, and you aren't able to or don't want to go back to your home country. So, can you go somewhere like Mexico and stay as a visitor for up to 180 days, potentially not needing a visa at all? Or can you get a temporary residence visa based on economic solvency? I see that question come up a lot. If anyone has questions, I'm happy to explore all of this. And I know Sean is as well, here at the end in a few slides. So please take notes if you have a question. And then box two here, an important thing I think to think about for those who have a role where they're supporting customers, potentially abroad, it would be to look at, is there a client site that is in a destination country you are able to go to where that client could sponsor the foreign national for the work visa? This is quite a common scenario, and a lot of countries have a specific immigration category suited specifically for this type of arrangement, where foreign nationals not being paid by the customer and the customer is not employing them per se, but they're hosting them. A lot of companies overlook this, so something for you to think about as a kind of a creative workaround. And then lastly, of course, return to home country while remaining a remote worker with payroll in another country. This is something, again, get creative. Does the payroll have to, do you want it to stay in the US or move it elsewhere for whatever reason? Remember that, immigration is triggered with physical presence in a country. So just because you're being paid in one country, but you're not there, that wouldn't necessarily trigger immigration for you being physically in a different country. So jumping on to the next slide, this is the case study Sean mentioned earlier. I'll let him take this away.
Yeah, so like Michelle mentioned, sometimes we need to blend different solutions. And this example from my practice integrates what I can do and what Michelle can do to fix a problem like this together. And this was a case where a person graduates from the US with a bachelor's degree and he has 3 years to work. Retention of this person in data science, which is a great field. Hope my kids become data scientists. They had to keep this person, the H-1B cap lottery problem notwithstanding. So we advised to immediately do perm. And, we had a couple more years left to try on the H-1B cap. We didn't know what the future held for Jeremy, but he just didn't get selected. At the time, he was just about out of OPT time. He was also just about done the green card process. It's a 3-step process. The first step requires a solid couple years to complete. But you can complete it from overseas. And that's what we needed to do in Jeremy's case. And that's where Michelle can provide that appropriate bridge and that additional complement of time that's needed overseas working just to complete the green card process. Once it's done, then the person comes back as a permanent resident. In Jeremy's case, having never gotten an H-1B, he went straight from F1 OPT to, I think it was about a 6-month international assignment, and he went back to his home country, which was Malaysia. But subsequent to which he came back as a permanent resident. And for U.S. immigration, that's about as quick as you can do it. So it's a good story, and I liked it because it kind of highlights the way that, from an integrated perspective, what I can do and what Michelle can do can kind of work together to achieve common purpose.
Awesome. So I hope we didn't move too quickly for everyone. We wanted to leave time for questions if you had it, and just ensure that we got through everything in a timely manner. So please, if you have any questions, send them in the comment section in the chat on your screen, and we will try to get to as many as we can.
I think that what I liked that Michelle, you raised, just to kind of comment, was, we engaged this panel today because we just have this system in the United States, which inherently has not been evolutionary. The numbers stayed 85,000 fixed, for decades now, regardless of the economic need. So it's nice to hear, in a complementary sense, that you're able to highlight countries like Ireland, that have more evolutionary systems and, the nomadic worker option. We just, what we have here is just still sort of what we've always had. So I just appreciate hearing the breath of fresh air. It's kind of, why we need to have a panel like this in the first place.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate that, Sean. I think it's interesting. I mean, there are so many options abroad, and I know if someone's in the US, in the first place, they probably want to be in the US, and they might not see another country as a true alternative to missing the H-1B cap lottery. But it doesn't have to be forever, and it opens up return on the L1 potentially. It opens up, potentially being able to work in, still close by in Canada, where they could, still be on North American time zone and still work on with their US team, their US projects, travel back and forth for business, perhaps. Lots of ways to look at this, which I think a lot of companies miss. If we don't have any questions, I saw a question from LinkedIn. Somebody had asked about, they've been trying to get a job in the US, and it seems like, or in I think other countries too, and it seemed like they weren't able to, once their potential employer knew they needed sponsorship. We can't help with job search, but I did want to mention I had an idea in response to that. again, going back to those affiliate offices abroad and utilizing intercompany transfer visas to the US or to any other country that has that visa category. Think a little bit more strategically as a foreign national, where can you apply for a job? If a company just has 2 offices, then, start with the one if it's in your home country, try and get a job there, and then maybe they can transfer you in future. You still need immigration sponsorship, but it's much different ballgame than starting from scratch with, an H-1B perhaps, which Sean can speak to, or, the equivalent of like a new hire visa in another country when you're brand new to the company as a whole. So something to think about there. I harp a lot on the intercompany transfer visa options, but they are a really good fit, not just in the US, but in other countries, because companies just move you around from country to country if you need to. And it just opens you up to a lot more options for your career growth and for becoming, kind of an integral person to that company.
Yeah, I like that because the longer I've been doing this, the more significant retention can be. And people come here for education and learn valuable skills, and then they enhance those working. And even if it's through some temporary need to offshore the person. Retention is just paramount. So it's interesting that we sometimes have to look outside the country because of this problem to be able to keep valuable resources. But it's the lay of the land.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, easier said than done, but here we have it. That's immigration for you. Yeah, if anyone has a question they want to send after, that's fine. Feel free to connect with Sean and I on LinkedIn or via email. We have our website listed on the next screen. Of course, if you signed up for this webinar, you should have all of our details. We're happy to discuss more offline with you specific to your individual situation. As a foreign national needing a solution, or as an employer that needs a solution for one or more of their foreign nationals. Thank you for joining, everybody. We enjoyed talking about this topic. I hope you found it useful. Anything for you to add, Sean?
No, thanks very much. We'd be happy to engage with anybody separately offline. And, this was a great program. And, thank you, Michelle.
You're welcome. Thanks, Sean. Thanks, everybody.